Union Station leached heat the way debt leeches sleep, and Lily Carter, a black American courier with warm brown skin, a high puff of tight curls, and thrift-scarred boots, was 3 shifts past sensible when her phone buzzed with her brother's text about tuition. She told the screen she would fix it, the way people in corners buy quiet with tomorrow's coins. A tiny snore escaped. A businessman coughed. Someone half hidden with a pilot's posture let out a quick, surprised laugh that sounded like a secret landing. Midway's executive lounge pretended to be a forest beneath glass. While Lily lined up 8 lattes by temperature, Victor Hanley, a spray-tan white man in a slick ink blue suit with a too bright platinum watch, drifted close and suggested she reroute the order to a private suite for a bonus. Lily answered that ink on the ticket outweighed whispers. When he leaned in and tried to turn suggestion into pressure, Captain Adrian Blake, a tall white man with ash-brown hair, grey-blue eyes and a midnight navy pilot jacket, stated in a calm, clipped voice that Lily had declined, and that this made the situation his. Security arrived, and Victor's badge status died faster than his smile. Up close, Adrian asked if Lily was okay. She said she was, then admitted she might have snored at Union Station. He replied that he had flown turboprops with worse manners. She finished the drop and vanished before anyone could assign her a story she didn't choose. By lunch, headlines shouted about an airline president ejecting a vendor. Adrian ignored them and focused on a paper cup on his desk with a neat note thanking the captain who prefers quiet engines. Signed L. Carter. He told Mason Ruiz, a broad-shouldered Mexican-American in a high-vis vest and steel toes, that he wanted the courier found. Officially to compensate her time, quietly because the ramp needed someone who showed up like gravity. By 3, fluorescent lights hummed over Lily while Mason welcomed her to ground ops, summarized that seeing a tug meant not becoming a bag, and slid her a vest. On the concourse, Harper Sloane, a honey-blonde white woman in a winter-white wrap coat and knife-clean heels, observed in polished neutrality that Summit West favored tidy optics. Lily answered that living inside lines other people drew must be comfortable. Mason's cough stepped in as a truce. The ramp proved honest, force for movement, attention for safety, sweat for money that didn't pretend to be charity. By 8, Lily hurried to a rooftop bar to cover a friend's corporate tasting. A text from the manager said, "Suite 813, private pour, no receipt," which read like code for bad math. Lily replied that she worked the floor, not rooms. The manager replied that she did tonight. At the hall's end, the platinum watch waited like a rerun. Lily messaged Adrian that she was being pushed towards something stupid and asked if he would talk her out of it. He answered that she should stay where witnesses were and that he was 5 minutes away. Car, not jet. Poor impulse control driving. She parked herself beside a sequined bachelorette party. The suite door cracked. A little red light blinked on a black box. Adrian reached the corridor with hotel security and explained that any recording would love court while the man in the watch would hate trespass. The plan collapsed without Lily crossing the threshold. Later, in an elevator that respected silence, Adrian's phone lit with a message from Eleanor Blake, a silver-haired white woman whose name carried boardrooms like a gavel. She scheduled Sunday brunch and instructed him to bring the woman who had changed the story on purpose. Adrian said he had told no one. Lily answered that the admission meant his mother already knew. In the lobby's expensive light, Adrian said pressure was rising to stage a convenient engagement with an investor's daughter, and that he refused to turn optics into vows. He proposed a temporary legal marriage with iron rules. Her veto, no staged affection, no using her as a weapon, no lies to her family, immediate compensation to cover Friday so they could breathe while the circus found another tent. Lily did math out loud by breathing, asked the number, Her 20,000 now and more if needed, plus health coverage if she kept ramp hours. She set boundaries. He matched them. The air actually got easier. At the courthouse at 8, a bailiff signed for a gluten-free scone, a stamp fell, and paper turned a plan into something bureaucracies obey. Outside, the wind tried to tug Adrian's jacket away. Lily slipped into it and reported that committing a victimless crime apparently came with nausea. He replied that the feeling shipped standard. They were half a block from the door when a grey-haired woman clutched a hip beside a dented SUV and claimed a student had broken her by backing up. Lily asked about an ambulance. The woman preferred cash. Lily pointed at a camera under an awning and suggested that documentation loved truth. The limp evaporated, and the college kid whispered that a ticket would have murdered tuition. Lily pressed a diner number into his palm and said, "Tuesday specials fed semesters." The airport reclaimed them. Work waiting, rumour weather forming, brunch looming like a crosswind, when Lily's phone chimed again. A photo appeared. Her reflection through Summit West's lobby glass wearing Adrian's jacket. The caption said that Sunday would be cancelled for her, and that showing up would hurt more than staying away. The sender signed with a single cool name she had only heard in polished tones, Harper. Lily looked at the message, then at the doors that led to the ramp and the life she was building from friction. She decided without raising her voice that threats were just weather, and weather got worked. Cliffhanger. The brunch is 3 days away, a sabotage text has landed, and a video trap Victor failed last night might have a bigger, cleaner twin waiting. Lily turns toward security to ask for camera access, only to hear Mason shout her name as 2 men she doesn't recognize step off the elevator and head straight for her, with envelopes and smiles that don't touch their eyes. The elevator doors parted and delivered 2 process servers, medium-built white men in cheap navy suits with rain still glittering on their shoulders, the kind of smiles that never found their eyes. Each carried a thick envelope with tabs like teeth. They announced in practiced voices that they had documents for Lily Carter, then held the envelopes the way fishermen hold hooks. Lily Carter, black American, warm brown skin, high puff of tight curls, thrift-scarred boots and a new high-vis vest, did not reach for anything. She asked whether the lobby cameras had audio. The men said the papers were time-sensitive and that refusal would not prevent service. She answered that she wasn't refusing, she was requesting witnesses. She raised a hand toward Darla Penn, a black woman in her 50s with salt and pepper twists and a security badge clipped to a charcoal blazer whose calm face could quiet stampedes. Darla stepped in, nodded at the lens above the desk, and told the men to proceed on camera. The first envelope named Lily in looping legal for tortious interference and defamation by implication, accusations attached to a vendor's LLC that smelled like Victor Hanley in aftershave form. The second demanded she preserve any and all communications with the president of Summit West. The men waited for her to fold. Lily said the words out loud so the microphone could hear. She observed that she had no dealings with the vendor beyond being harassed, that she had not published, implied, or winked any defamation, and that she would be happy to preserve everything, including the hotel's footage. The men, deprived of drama, slid the papers onto the counter as if placing them on a griddle. Darla countersigned a receipt for service, then escorted them back to the elevator with a politeness that froze the air around it. When the doors shut, Mason Ruiz, Mexican-American with a high-vis vest, kind eyes and ramp grit on his steel toes, exhaled loud enough to startle a plant. He said he was texting Captain Adrian Blake, tall, ash-brown hair, grey-blue eyes, in a midnight navy jacket, because paperwork like this didn't arrive in a vacuum. Lily asked Darla whether she could start a formal request for the hotel's full security footage and the lounge corridor clips from the morning. Darla replied that she already had. The timestamp and chain of custody were moving faster than gossip. Adrian arrived with the clipped stride of a man who disliked being late to turbulence. He took in the envelopes, the camera, and Lily's steady posture. He said he was sorry, again, that proximity to him had put a target on her. She answered that a target didn't choose her back, and that paper weather meant umbrellas, not retreats. He told her, quietly, that legal would handle the demand letters, and that the fastest route through was often the cleanest. Receipts, timestamps, and the quiet force of fact. The day refused to slow. Harper Sloane, honey blonde hair smooth as glass, winter white wrap coat, and a perfume that spelled citrus and control, glided into the lobby with a tablet tucked to her side like a verdict. She observed, without looking at Lily, that legal storms could be minimized by refraining from extracurricular narratives. Adrian turned his head, the way a pilot sets a bearing, and told Harper that Summit West did not weaponize intimidation against employees or contractors, and would not start today. Harper's smile contracted by half a degree. She advised that his mother's brunch had moved up by 30 minutes, and that she would see them there. The tablet's edge flashed as she pivoted, a blade returning to its sheath. Lily said that if the plan remained to attend, she would go. Adrian asked if she wanted to skip. He would take the heat. Lily shook her head once. She said she would rather meet weather at the door than pretend the house was silent. Sunday dressed itself in slate and light. Eleanor Blake, white, silver hair cut in a precise bob, glacier blue eyes, charcoal sheath dress, and a strand of pale pearls, opened her front door with a welcome that could both warm and weigh. The house wore glass and stone like old money wears time. The dining room set a long table with the efficiency of a board packet. Eleanor listened, while Adrian summarized Friday and Saturday without flourish. A vendor removed for harassment, a hotel trap that failed on camera, letters served under a shell company. She turned to Lily and asked, without needle, how Lily saw it. Lily said she saw a man confused about consent and a machine that expected her to be quiet about it. She added that she preferred daylight and documentation. Eleanor's mouth made a shape that might be approval if approval came in millimeters. She explained that in her world, paper moved mountains when it carried the right signatures, and that she hoped Lily had good pens. Brunch approached like due diligence, disguised as poached eggs. Eleanor asked Lily what she loved that wasn't work. Lily said she loved the early part of a city morning when the buses ran empty and the air smelled like bread and rain, and that she loved the feeling of a plane's wheels leaving ground when you could still see the runway but no longer owed it weight. Eleanor said she liked that answer and then, almost idly, asked whether Lily understood what standing next to a man like Adrian did to a life. Lily said she understood that people would invent narratives she hadn't auditioned for, and that her job was to keep telling the true one until it stuck. Only once did the sky crack. Harper arrived late, apologized to Eleanor for a donor who wouldn't release her, and set a crystal-thin box on the sideboard for Lily. A vintage scarf that matched nothing Lily owned and everything Harper thought she should. Harper said it would help Lily photograph better, then added, under breath thin enough to hide behind etiquette, that some rooms expect polish before they permit presence. Eleanor did not look at Harper. She told Lily, in a voice like a bell, that presence is earned by spine, not silk. When they rose to leave, Eleanor touched Lilia's forearm with cool fingertips and said she hoped to see her again, that storms trained pilots and people better than clear air did. Adrian, who had flown through thunder that bent radar, looked like a man who had finally heard the forecast he could work with. Monday tried to buy shortcuts. A foreman on the ramp told Lily to load tail-heavy to shave 3 minutes off a turn. She told him the balance plan was a law, not a suggestion. He said Summit West liked speed. She said Summit West liked wheels down more. The captain, walking his pre-flight, paused, listened, and gave Lily the two-finger acknowledgement that said seen and appreciated in a language older than HR. Upstairs, Adrian met a mother and a teenage daughter in a hallway lined with airframes. Margaret Chen, Chinese-American, hair in a practical bun, cardigan pilled at the elbows, held 3 letters and a year of apology. She said her husband had died helping evacuate a hangar and that a promised benefit had never arrived. She apologized for the bother. Adrian asked for the name of the manager, who kept saying, "In process." The name belonged to a man who wore blandness like armor. The check moved by afternoon. The badge that had stalled it stopped opening doors by evening. Margaret left with money and the unspooling exhaustion of being believed. By dusk, Darla Penn pinged Lily with links. The hotel's hallway cams, the suite corridor, the service elevator, all time-stamped and signed. Lily watched herself refuse to step over a line, watched Adrian arrive with security, watched Victor S. mouth shape a threat that would look like consent on an edited screen, but did not survive the full cut. She filed everything into duplicate drives like someone building her own levee. The demand letter's second clause, preserve communications with the president, became a rope some hands hoped to pull. Lily printed her texts with Adrian, all business and boundary, and slid them into a folder that felt heavier than its paper. She told herself that if anyone tried to lift context out with tweezers, she would bring the whole table. At closing, as the terminal's announcements softened, Harper sent one more message. Not an overt threat this time, but a suggestion dressed as advice. Optics improve when certain people take quieter exits. Lily read the line twice and then did something she wasn't certain about until she did it. She walked to the stairwell that led to executive, knocked once on glass, and asked the receptionist to tell Ms. Sloan she would like 5 minutes on neutral ground. Hangar mezzanine, open space, witnesses optional. Harper arrived as if appointments sprouted where she stepped. She asked with a smile that could slice what Lily wanted. Lily said she wanted clarity because mud only helped the people already standing on hills. She said she would not apologize for refusing traps, for working by the book, or for attending brunch when invited. She said she would not wear the scarf. She added evenly that whoever texted a photo through the lobby glass might consider that cameras point both directions, and that she preferred daylight to click rumor. Harper's smile did not falter, but the eyes cooled another degree. She said Lily should be careful with absolutes. Lily said she preferred them to innuendo. They parted with a politeness that felt like a signed ceasefire someone might break by lunch. Back on the ramp, night stole edges and left silhouettes. Lily walked the line between cones and noise and told herself that whatever came in envelopes could be sorted by weight and truth. Her phone buzzed once, a new, unknown number carrying a 7-second clip. Her face, the elevator, a man's hand reaching toward her shoulder that never touched because she stepped away. The clip ended mid-breath, captioned with a single word, soon. Darla texts at the same instant. The lounge camera from Friday just went dark, retroactively. Someone has scrubbed a key hour from the system, and the backup server shows a login from a guest terminal on Harper's floor. The alert arrived like a pulled fire alarm in Lily's pocket. Darla Penn, a black woman in her 50s with salt and pepper twists and a charcoal blazer that made her look like the calm in other people's storms, texted that the lounge camera from Friday had gone dark, retroactively, and that the backup showed a login from a guest terminal on Harper's floor. Lily read it twice and felt the weak tilt. Lily Carter, black American with warm brown skin, a high puff of tight curls and steel-toe boots that wore their miles in creases, found Captain Adrian Blake, tall and white with ash-brown hair and grey-blue eyes, in the glass corridor that looked down on taxiing aircraft. She told him that a whole hour had been erased and that the eraser had signed in from Harper's hallway. He listened with the stillness he used for bad weather and said they would need eyes, real ones, not rumors, on the logs before anyone decided what the narrative was. They went to IT Forensics, a cave of humming racks and soft blue LEDs. Priya Nandakumar, a South Asian woman in her late 30s with dark curls in a low bun, copper-rimmed glasses, and a zip hoodie that read patch by patch like a resume, glanced up from a terminal and waved them in. She said without small talk that someone had reached into the VMS, video management system, and yanked an hour like a bad thread. She added that the guest terminal on Harper's floor had been used twice, once to request the clip list, once to push a deletion that only a privileged token could authorize. Mason Ruiz, Mexican-American, square-shouldered in a high-vis vest and steel toes gritted with ramp dust, leaned against a server cabinet and asked how a guest machine got god powers. Priya said the guest box did not. She said the box borrowed a token minted by someone who did. She pulled up a timeline, the kind that made time into bars and nodes, and tapped an entry that glowed a colder blue. She explained that the token was minted from a kiosk in Legal at 7:12 p.m., presented on Harper's floor at 7:18, and used again at 7:26 to confirm the wipe. She added that the minting kiosk required a badge touch and a palm scan. Adrian asked who had access to that kiosk. Jonah Park, a Korean-American man in his early 40s with a slate suit, kind eyes, and a tie knotted like he had practiced on turbulence days, stepped in from Legal with a folder and said the list was short. Him, two senior counsels, Darla and Adrian, none of whom had been in the building when the token minted. He said he had checked the building logs twice. He said the system believed someone had replicated a palm. Lily thought of the platinum watch and of how money liked to buy shortcuts. She said out loud for the timeline that a vendor with a grudge and resources might hire someone who knew where security was thin. Priya nodded and said cloned badges were a known sin. Cloned palms were rarer, but a high-resolution print on glass plus a careless enrollment could be enough. Mason asked what came next. Jonah said they had 2 lanes, a quiet internal lockdown while they traced the token, or a loud report to outside investigators that would leak before lunch and turn everything into a public bonfire. Adrian looked at Lily, not for permission, but for temperature. Lily said she preferred daylight, but liked evidence more, and that if they went loud without receipts, they would serve their throats to rumor. Darla messaged again. A second anomaly. Someone had tried to request the same missing hour from a different building on the hotel's network. A concierge office that, when Priya pulled the lease, mapped to a shell company that smelled like Victor Hanley with better cologne. Priya said she could scrape the DHCP logs and maybe pull a MAC address, and if she did, the device would have a fingerprint as distinct as a face. They ran the play quiet. Darla sealed the VMS with a chain of custody file that dated and signed every fingertip. Jonah drafted a preservation letter to the hotel and the Shell LLC that sounded polite enough to be frightening. Priya built a script that would watch for any future token minted outside business hours and would sing to her phone if it happened. The day tried to be ordinary. Lily moved bags and balanced like prayer and physics. A foreman suggested a shortcut. She pointed at the plan and said the law lived on paper. A captain gave her the 2-finger acknowledgement whose grammar she was learning by muscle and wind. The serve papers on Lily's desk sat like an unwelcome pet. Adrian told her Legal would handle them. Jonah said the best answer to a threat was an index of receipts so thick it snapped a wrist. Lily printed texts, logged times, and backed up backups until evidence felt like armor. Just past sunset, Priya's script sang. She said from the doorway that a new token had just been minted, same kiosk, same permissions, and that the presenting machine sat in a conference room no one had reserved. Darla was already moving. Adrian and Lily followed. They reached the glass-walled room and found it empty except for a fragrance, citrus and cedar, that had become its own fingerprint. On the table lay a silk scarf in pale porcelain blue, folded with knife precision. Lily recognized the scarf from the brunch box. She thought about optics and about rooms that permit presence only after polish. Harper arrived as if the room had texted her. Harper Sloane, a honey-blonde white woman with hazel eyes and a winter-white wrap coat, asked why everyone was here with a tone that suggested the question was rhetorical. Adrian told her that a privilege token had just been minted again. He said they were following the log. Harper smiled without heat and said privilege tokens were above her pay grade. She said someone should talk to legal. Jonah said they were doing exactly that. He asked Harper where she had been at 7:12 and whether she would mind letting Darla photograph her palms for the internal record. Harper's smile held, but the eyes cooled. She said she would prefer to route questions through counsel and that it was beneath the president to indulge witch hunts. She turned to Lily and added, soft enough to hide behind etiquette, that some people forgot their place and paid for it with opportunities. Lily said, in a voice calm enough to be a mirror, that her place was wherever the work required and that the only currency she recognized was receipts. Harper set one manicured finger on the scarf and told Lily that silk does not change who wears it. She said steel toes did not either. Darla asked whether Harper would like to wait while security pulled prints from the conference door. Harper said she had a donor dinner and hoped this detour would end with apologies to the right people. She left citrus and silence behind. Silence. Priya hustled the scarf to a lab envelope and slid it into a bag with a tamper seal. She said the presenting machine's NIC address matched a laptop issued to a temporary analyst whose HR file began last Tuesday and ended this morning, terminated for non-performance. Jonah pulled the file and frowned at the scanned ID. The photo looked like a person you forget on purpose. The signature looked practiced at being almost right. Mason said the shell company at the hotel must be preparing a drop. Jonah said defamation works best when it arrives first. He suggested getting ahead of it. Adrian said he would take the heat publicly if Lily wanted the quiet lane. Lily said she had learned this week that quiet often gets assigned to the wrong people. She said she would rather speak before someone dubbed her silence consent. They planned a preemptive statement that did not spit names, but held the line. An attempted setup of a contractor failed on camera. Tampering with security logs had been detected. Law enforcement had been notified. The airline stood with any employee or vendor who refused harassment. Jonah said he would vet the verbs. Darla said she would place the calls. Before the send button could be reached, a new message hit everyone's phones at once, the kind of breaking blast media team's schedule before dawn. The subject line promised exclusive footage of Summit West's president's mystery woman in a hotel and implied consent with ellipses and arrows. The body contained a countdown clock. 6 a.m. Lily looked at the timer and felt the clock stare back. Jonah said he could file an injunction in hours. He said the clip would still leak sideways like water. Priya said she was 90% sure she could trace the staging CDN once the link went live, and 95% sure she could prove tampering. Darla said proving tomorrow was useful, but blocking tonight might save a life. Adrian asked Lily what she wanted. Lily said she wanted air, real air, and then she wanted to move first. She suggested recording a single clean statement that narrated the week with receipts and none of the gossip, that a vendor had crossed a line, that she had said no, that a camera had been attacked after the fact, that she and the airline had preserved everything and welcomed outside eyes. Adrian said he would stand next to her and keep the frame steady. Jonah said he would stand behind the camera and keep the verbs legal. Priya said she would set a second camera and a checksum, so not even a pixel could be spun. They chose the hangar mezzanine, the one with the glass spine of runways as the backdrop. Mason set cones to keep the curious at bay. Darla posted 2 guards and called in a favor from a detective she trusted. Lily faced the lens and told the week like a logbook. The laugh in a train station, the paper deal with rules, the man with a watch and a trap that didn't spring, the brunch that behaved like a board meeting, the missing hour and the token that wore someone else's palm, the decision to choose daylight. She spoke without decoration. She let facts do the work. Adrian added exactly one sentence, that the airline's zero-tolerance policy was not a slogan but a budget line, and that anyone who tested it would find out how quickly doors stop opening. Priya clapped the slate. Jonah nodded. Darla gave a small thumbs up that meant it would hold. They scheduled the post for 5:40 a.m., 20 minutes before the countdown promised sensation. They built a packet for law enforcement and a private one for Eleanor. At 5:12 a.m., the building shivered. A smoke alarm wailed where smoke alarms shouldn't, in the server room 3 floors below. Priya ran before the sound finished inhaling. Darla was already on the radio. Adrian told Lily to stay with Jonah and Mason, and then didn't finish the sentence because staying wasn't in her bones. They reached the server corridor and ran into heat that smelled wrong, canned cold and hot plastic. Priya swiped the door, and the room exhaled a fog of compressed air. On the floor beside the VMS rack lay 2 overturned dust-off cans, a novelty kitchen timer ticking down from mil 41, and a black USB stick jammed into the RAID controller like a snake bite. Priya said, very softly, that someone had tried to clean the cameras with coolant and had almost succeeded. She said the USB could be a kill script or worse. Mason lunged for the timer. Darla grabbed his wrist and told him not to touch anything that clicked. Adrian traced the cable from the USB with his eyes and said the array was still mirroring. A miracle, but not a permanent one. Priya said she needed exactly 1 minute and hands steady enough to build a bridge with no wood. The timer hit 0019. Somewhere above them, the building's PA crackled with a voice that did not belong to security or ops. The voice announced, in a tone that sounded pleased to be heard, that the airport had a story to tell at 6 and that anyone who loved a reveal should be awake to watch. Lily looked from the timer to the door glass and saw a reflection that did not belong. Someone standing just beyond the swing, a figure in a pale coat that caught the hallway light like water. The figure lifted a phone. The screen glowed with the countdown, 0.17, 0.16, and a single word typed beneath it as if a signature were a flourish. Soon. Priya's fingers hover over the USB. The timer bleeds seconds. The reflection in the glass doesn't move, and the scheduled truth Lily recorded is set to publish in 28 minutes if the servers survive the next 15. The server room sounded like a held breath. Priya Nandakumar, a South Asian woman in her late 30s, with copper-rimmed glasses, dark curls in a low bun, and a hoodie crowded with old conference pins, crouched beside a humming RAID controller, while a novelty kitchen timer ticked on the tile like a prank that had learned to count. 2 compressed air cans lay frosted on their sides. Whoever had tried to clean the cameras had sprayed liquid cold until metal cried. Lily Carter, black American with warm brown skin, a high puff of tight curls, and steel-toe boots creased by miles, watched the red digits drop. 018, 017. In the door glass she caught Captain Adrian Blake's reflection. Tall, white, ash-brown hair, grey-blue eyes steady as a horizon. And beyond his shoulder, a pale shape in the hallway holding up a phone that displayed the same countdown. The screen also showed one word, typed like a dare. Soon. Priya didn't touch the black USB lodged in the controller. She murmured that it was likely a kill script. Pull it and brick the array. Leave it and let it fire at 0. She asked for a surgical disconnect. On my count, only the out-of-band port. Mason Ruiz, Mexican-American with a high-vis vest, square shoulders and ramp grit whitening his boots, slid beside the rack. Darla Penn, a black woman in her 50s with salt and pepper twists and a charcoal blazer that read "Calm in Storms," wrapped her hand around Mason's wrist. On her count, she said. 3, Priya breathed. 2, 1. Mason eased the single Ethernet free like a tooth. The timer rolled 0.09. Priya cloned the controller's state to a sacrificial blade, severing its ability to accept commands from anything but her terminal. 0.06. Then a tiny hiccup. The cheap spring stuttered and paused. She hot-patched a path to the cloud mirror she'd quietly stood up hours earlier, jailed the USB's process without waking it, and sealed the array from new instructions. The timer coughed to 0.03, then died altogether. Drama more than damage. Darla stepped into the hall. The pale coat belonged not to Harper but to Elodie Vance, a white woman in her late 20s with paper-pale hair, clear frame glasses, and a temp analyst badge. She blinked as if hallways had surprised her. When Darla pointed at the phone, Elodie said everyone had the countdown and that watching a clock wasn't a felony. The mirrored case flashed. Darla asked her to wait for security review. Elodie smiled, the practiced elevator-safe smile, and asked for a restroom. "I'll walk you," Darla said, and the smile thinned. Inside, Priya cracked the controller's memory. The USB held a script named "like a firmware patch," set to execute at 5:58, 6 minutes before an exclusive promised scandal. It wouldn't have deleted footage. It would have scrambled indices, like swapping labels on a library, so proof existed, but couldn't be found at speed. Priya imaged the stick bit for bit, dropped it into a tamper bag next to last night's silk scarf, and snapped the seal. "Will our statement make it out?" Adrian asked. "Even if this building forgets its name," Priya said, "the mirrors are clean." Jonah Park, a Korean-American man in his early 40s with a slate suit, kind eyes, and a turbulence-tight tie, jogged in with a folder. He said he'd filed an injunction and pinged a prosecutor he trusted. He added that an anonymous tip had just told police Summit West was hiding evidence in the server room. He said anonymous tip like a diagnosis. Lily told Adrian she didn't want to go quiet. "Silence gets assigned to the wrong people," she said. "Let's speak first." Darla returned, Elodie in her orbit like a slow moon. Elodie's company phone was unusually heavy for a temp. Priya asked to borrow it for forensics. Elodie asked for a lawyer. "You're not under arrest," Darla said. "You're under protection." They took it upstairs. The hangar mezzanine gave them a spine of glass. Taxi lines below, dawn rinsing the runway. Mason set cones. Priya rolled 2 cameras, one to local, one straight to the cloud. Darla posted at the stair with 2 cops she'd called in. Detective Ana Rivas, Latina, mid-40s, low braid, leather jacket over a plain tee, and Officer Jay Patel, South Asian, early 30s, clean-shaven, eyes like level. Rivas said she was here as a courtesy and a wall. At 5:40, after Jonah's verb check, Lily faced the lens and narrated the week like weather. The laugh in the station, the lounge corridor, a man with a watch who treated no like barter, a suite door that didn't close because witnesses existed, a brunch that behaved like a board meeting, a missing hour deleted from inside the house, a token minted by a palm that shouldn't exist, a timer that chose theatre over thermite. She ended with grammar. People who mistake silence for consent are bad at both. Adrian added one line, "Policy is a budget, not a slogan," and they hit publish. Phones buzzed, some comments believed, some demanded bonfires. Darla said the flag was planted before rumor could trample the grass. 5:47. The elevator delivered Sergeant Tom Greeley, white 50s grey moustache like an old headline, plus 2 uniforms and a clipboard. He announced a warrant to seize all video devices and servers. Jonah read, blinked once, and pointed out that the address was next door and the corporate name wrong. "Paper can't carry what it doesn't correctly name," he said, handing it back. Greeley frowned and called his lieutenant. Detective Rivas's shrug said someone's trying to strong-arm a clock. Jay Patel, without moving much, placed himself squarely between the sergeant and the server corridor. 5:54. Priya's phone chirped. The co-exclusive moved its release up. Impatience has fingers, and a spliced clip went live. Lily, in a hotel hall, an arm entering frame, a jump cut that teleported her across a threshold she never crossed. Flooring changed. Outrage wouldn't notice. Priya was already tracing the CDN. Jonah fired the injunction with the hotel's chain of custody attached like teeth. "Hide or speak?" Adrian asked. "Work," Lily said. "What job keeps the next door from swinging?" "Hold the room," Darla answered. "Don't let anyone walk us out of our own evidence." 5:58. The server room lights flickered. Not power. Network. Priya said someone had reanimated a decommissioned terminal, Guest Ops 4, and poisoned the internal DNS to Sinkhole Summit West site on airport Wi-Fi. She swore once, cleanly, then slid roots around the trap like a tug shoving a 737 off ice. The mirrors held. A shadow moved beyond the mezzanine glass. Pale coat, clear frames. Elodie. She angled toward a stairwell with a second shape knitting to her side. Victor Hanley, white, early 40s, salon black hair and too bright smile, now in a charcoal windbreaker that pretended not to know about yesterday's suit. He bent to her ear as if dictating a caption. Darla lifted a hand. Detective Rivas moved. Greeley pivoted, caught between the wrong warrant and the right chase. Priya murmured that the mirrors were healthy, the post alive, the sinkhole closed. Jonah said a judge had just read their injunction. The CDN would be contacted in 5. Adrian's phone flashed a single word from Eleanor Blake. White, silver bob, pearls, and glacier eyes. Steady. The glass door shuddered under a fist that didn't belong to law or staff. It ticked inward against the stop. Another knock, faster. A phone pressed to the pane, mirrored case flashing. The screen showed a tighter, dirtier cut of Lily's face and scrawled in lipstick red across the video, "Confess." Rivas lunged. The door gave. Victor slipped sideways with a dancer's pivot. Elodie's phone clattered, skidded under the server room threshold, and stopped inches from the bagged USB Priya had sealed. An accidental Exhibit A, still warm. Greeley cleared his throat, newly triumphant, as a second officer hustled up with fresh paperwork. "Corrected warrant," he said, lifting it like a prize. "Right address, right name, judge's signature." Jonah took it, already reading, already shaking his head at a malformed verb that could still crack a door. Priya pointed, breath tight. "If that phone sleeps, it'll wipe," she said. "I need it now for the fingerprint and the live token." Darla's voice cut low and even. "Nobody moves without a plan." Lily stood at the hinge of two choices. Lunge for the mirrored phone before its self-erase ate the last clean print and risk a sergeant yanking the room on a technicality, or hold the line, let process crawl, and watch a thumbprint vanish in 10 seconds and a narrative harden forever. 10 seconds. 9. The phone screen dimmed, a tide going out. Lily bends her knees to move, as Jonah says, "Wait." Priya says, "Now." Greeley says, "Seize." And somewhere below them the runway lights blossom for a dawn departure that will not wait for anyone's story. Lily didn't dive. She looked left instead, toward Detective Ana Rivas, a Latina in her mid-40s with a low braid and a leather jacket that fit like authority, and said that the phone under the server room threshold was about to wipe, and that if anyone should touch it, the badge should. Rivas moved the way people move through doorways during fires, straight, fast, economical. She snapped on nitrile gloves with her teeth, slid a pen beneath the mirrored case, levered it into her palm, and announced for the air and the cameras that she was taking custody under exigent circumstances to prevent evidence destruction. Priya Nandakumar, a South Asian woman in her late 30s with copper-rimmed glasses and a hoodie freckled with conference pins, exhaled like a valve. She asked Rivas for 10 seconds of live access, screen awake, no Face ID, so she could dump the device's volatile tokens before the wipe demon finished its prayer. Rivas tapped the power, lifted the phone for the mezzanine lights, and held it steady while Priya's cable latched and her command window filled with hex-like rain. Sergeant Tom Greeley, white 50s, grey moustache, trained for bluster, cleared his throat and raised the corrected warrant. He said he now had authority to seize all recording equipment and digital storage, his chin tilting like a batter eyeing a slow pitch. Jonah Park, a Korean-American in his early 40s, with a slate suit and careful eyes, kept reading while answering that the warrant still overreached. He pointed to a verb that tried to swallow adjacent premises and a clause that forgot the word particular. He suggested pleasantly that the sergeant call the judge while everyone obeyed the Constitution. Darla Penn, a black woman in her 50s with salt and pepper twists and a charcoal blazer, placed herself between Greeley and the door with the posture of a person who had steered crowds on bad days. Officer Jay Patel, South Asian, early 30s, clean-shaven, stood beside her with his hands open in the way that tells muscles to make good decisions. In the stairwell beyond the glass, Victor Hanley, white, early 40s, salon black hair now disguised by a charcoal windbreaker, tried to melt sideways. Elodie Vance, a white woman in her late 20s with paper-pale hair and clear-frame glasses, followed the vector of escape until Darla's voice, calm, even impossible to ignore, told both to remain available for questioning unless they wished the handcuffs that matched their choices. Priya watched the dump crawl. She said she had the device's live auth token for the Guest Ops 4 Phantom, plus the MAC address of the laptop that pushed the sinkhole. The token S-Mint Trace pointed back to the same legal kiosk that had birthed the missing hour deletion and wore the same cloned palm signature. She added that the phone's wipe routine was a commercial app with a vanity skull icon. Its trigger list included screen off, battery below 15%, and wrong pin twice. 2 seconds, she said, breath thin. 1, done. Rivers slid the phone into a paper evidence bag and signed the seal. Greeley finished his call with an expression that said the judge had worn him down to his shoes. He announced that he would return with clarified language and that failure to cooperate would find its remedy. Jonah smiled without teeth and said they were cooperating so hard there would be handprints on the rulebook. The mirrored site hosting the spliced clip began to stutter. Priya, eyes on a second screen, said the CDN had started to honor the injunction. Bits were falling off the table like badly glued props. Lily rolled her shoulders. She told Adrian, the tall, ash-brown-haired, grey-blue-eyed man in a midnight navy jacket who looked like he measured crosswinds by instinct, that she wanted to get back to the work that paid rent. Adrian nodded once, a pilot's acceptance of whether you can fly. Harper Sloane, a honey-blonde white woman in a winter-white wrap coat and hazel eyes that reflected light more than heat, appeared at the mezzanine edge as if the building had conjured her. She apologized to Eleanor Blake, white, silver bob, glacier blue eyes, pearls at brunch, on speaker for the disruption, and observed that escalation always hurt shareholders first. Eleanor's voice came through cool and exact. She said escalation hurt companies most when they were led by people who flinched at the truth. She then asked Harper whether Harper had any idea why a token minted from a legal kiosk on Harper S. floor kept wandering into crimes. Harper smiled the kind of smile people wear to dentist appointments. She said floors housed many feet and that tokens did not ask permission to stray. She also noted that the board would convene at noon to assess leadership risk. Eleanor answered that she would bring coffee and the vote. Victor tried swagger. He said the company should worry less about old men with watches and more about what would happen when the next video landed, one that had better editors and a room full of donors ready to be scandalized on command. Detective Rivas reminded him he had the right to remain silent, and that, in his case, silence might be the first intelligent thing he'd purchased. Elodie stared at her shoes until Lily asked softly whether Elodie had ever wanted a job that wasn't a shadow of someone else's. Elodie swallowed. She said a woman in a white coat had told her she'd be helping correct a narrative, and that there would be cash for a month's rent and a dentist. Lily asked if the coat had smelled like citrus and cedar. Elodie nodded once, tiny. Harper's eyes didn't blink. She told Jonah that if his line of questioning continued, counsel would enter. Jonah said counsel was already here, and it had 2 lenses and 3 signatures. Phones buzzed in a small wave. Priya announced that the token she decaptured was now trying to phone home from a new endpoint labeled concierge, with a domain registered at 3 a.m. to a shell that matched Victor's LLC down to the P.O. box. She could, she said, shove a truth in and see what fell out. "Do it," Adrian said. She did. The endpoint returned a directory by accident, listings of media assets, timestamps, a folder tree labeled B-roll with hotel hallway angles that matched their footage, and a text file named cast. Text. Priya opened it. The first lines read like a production slate: primary antagonist, exec, decoy, temp, asset handler, vendor, liaison, IR. The initials beside liaison, IR, were H.S. Harper laughed then, but it came out as a sound with no breath behind it. She said initials proved nothing. She had never touched a token, never edited a clip, never stepped into a server room. Eleanor's voice, still on speaker, cut the room in half. She said that if anyone under her roof had used investor relations to harass or entrap, that person's next salary would be measured in apologies and subpoenas. Victor lost elegance. He said the room was chasing the wrong quarry. He said the real architect wasn't in white at all. Rivas asked who he intended to name. Victor smirked at the ceiling, eyes glinting with the idea of a bigger bomb. He said the architect wore pearls and scheduled storms. The mezzanine air changed temperature. Adrian's jaw worked once. Eleanor did not speak for 2 beats that felt like a held landing. Then she said, flat as a checklist, that men who confuse strategy with sabotage always assume women who pick up knives bring them for the wrong reasons. She said she would sit for questions in her own time, and that meanwhile Detective Rivas might like to hear about the donor dinner where Harper had excused herself to take a call. Rivas took the cue, pulled out a notepad, and asked Harper for the time, the caller, and the message. Harper declined on advice she had not received. Rivas recorded the decline. A quiet fell, thin, brittle, the kind that comes before glass breaks. It broke with the building's PA. A new voice, smooth, androgynous, unhurried, announced that an air quality incident required immediate evacuation of levels 2 through 4. Sprinklers scissored awake overhead, cold water needled down, paper darkened, phones glistened. Priya threw a cloth over her rig and shouted, "Power and packet!" to the room. Darla's voice boomed to stay put unless fire or law said otherwise. Greeley lifted the corrected warrant with triumph. Water slicked it into a pulp map of authority. Priya lunged for the uplink to keep the mirrors alive. Rivas grabbed the evidence bag with the phone and the USB. Jonah hugged the injunction like a life vest. Victor pivoted toward the stairs in the chaos. Elodie flinched. She looked at Lily, and then at an exit that smelled like choices. Over the sprinkler hiss, a single text landed on Lily's screen, a photo of a hospital bracelet with Noah Carter in block caps and a timestamp of 08:12. The message said only, "Accident. Don't make your next decision the wrong one." The sender ID was blank. Lily stared at her brother's name as the mezzanine blurred to rain and alarms. Priya's uplink flickers, the room floods. Rivas lunges for Victor. Harper steps back into the rain and smiles like she's already dry. Lily has to choose between chasing the hand pulling the fire alarm and running for a hospital she hasn't been told the address of. The sprinkler hiss pressed voices flat. Lily Carter, black American, warm brown skin, high puff of tight curls, steel-toe boots polished by use, stared at her phone, a hospital bracelet with Noah Carter printed in block caps. The text warned that her next decision could be the wrong one. She didn't run. She lifted the screen to Detective Ana Rivas, Latina, mid-40s, low braid, leather jacket that fits like authority, and said the message smelled like leverage, not family. Rivas photographed the screen for the evidence chain and told Lily to verify. Lily called the hospital switchboard. No Noah Carter anywhere in the system. She called her brother. He answered on the second ring, breathless from crossing campus, unhurt, amused that a Bunsen burner had won. Relief made Lily grip the rail. She forwarded the threat to the case file. Whoever sent it wanted panic, not help. Water needled down. Priya Nandakumar, South Asian, late 30s, copper-rimmed glasses and a hoodie crowded with conference pins, draped a towel over her laptop and shouted that the uplink was flickering. Captain Adrian Blake, tall white man with ash-brown hair and grey-blue eyes, braced a palm on the network rack, while Sergeant Tom Greeley, white 50s grey moustache, clutched a soggy, corrected warrant like it was flotation. Jonah Park, Korean-American, early 40s, slate suit and careful eyes, stepped between clipboard and cables and said, pleasantly loud, that a sprinkler wasn't a search and exigent didn't mean everything. Darla Penn, black woman 50s, salt and pepper twists, charcoal blazer, blew a whistle that cut through alarms, and told everyone to hold position unless they were fire or law with a lawful verb. Good whistles work. The room held. At the stairwell, Victor Hanley, white, early 40s, salon black hair under a charcoal windbreaker, tried to ghost downstairs. Officer J. Patel, South Asian, early 30s, steady eyes, open hands, halted him without theatre. Elodie Vance, white late 20s, paper pale hair and clear frame glasses, hovered, satellite undecided about gravity. The PA demanded evacuation for air quality. Darla radioed facilities, no smoke, no heat, just a manual pull on level 3 and a spoofed sensor. Priya called it what it was, denial of service with sprinklers. Through the rain, Harper Sloane appeared, honey blonde, winter-white wrap coat, hazel eyes that reflect light more than heat, speaking to Eleanor Blake on speaker. Harper said, operational instability, distressed investors, and proposed placing certain people on leave, pending review. Eleanor, white, precise silver bob, glacier blue eyes, pearls that have outlived headlines, answered that decisive action began with removing anyone whose initials adorned a file named cast. Text. Harper's smile held. Temperature dropped. Priya checked logs. Mirrors still live. Lily's hangar statement still up. The spliced clips takedown propagating. The bagged phone Detective Rivas seized earlier showed a remote wipe attempt. Blocked. A second attempt came from a host labeled concierge. Priya fed it a decoy and watched the socket open like a mouth. Rivas began second position interviews in the rain. She asked Elodie whether liaison, IR, in that cast file had recruited her to correct a narrative. Elodie's eyes flicked to Harper, then to Lily. She said a voice that smelled like citrus and cedar, promised rent and a dentist if she helped the brand protect itself. 10 minutes ago, the same voice texted the bracelet photo and told her to ask whether family can afford headlines. The line landed like a thrown knife. Harper's smile didn't change. The room's temperature did. Victor tried magnanimous cooperation. He announced that donors wanted clarity, not crusades. Rivas read him his rights again and asked whether his LLC registered the concierge domain at 3:07 a.m. He said he had people. She asked whether those people rented a guest office at the hotel. He didn't handle operations. She asked about the mirrored phone now bagged with his prints on the glass from 20 minutes earlier. Silence did the talking. Sprinklers stuttered and stopped. Silence puddled. Darla kept the perimeter. Jonah passed Priya a microfiber cloth. Adrian shook water from his cuffs and asked Lily, under the kind of breath that weighs more than volume, what she wanted. Quiet path or daylight. Lily said daylight. Quiet belongs to the guilty and the sleeping. The next hour ran like a checklist that refused panic. Facilities reset the panel. ET re-imaged the VMS now that the pipes were dry. Legal fired a second wave of injunctions. Security walked Victor and Elodie to 2 chairs, 2 cameras. Investor relations walked in circles, then sat 2. At noon, the board met. Eleanor chaired with the same voice she used to ask for salt. 10 minutes of facts, 1 minute of expectation. She recommended suspending Harper pending investigations, freezing and reviewing all Shell-linked contracts tied to Victor, and funding a zero-tolerance harassment protocol with enforcement and budget. The board voted. Suspension carried. Freeze carried. Funding carried. Harper asked whether sabbatical sounded gentler. Eleanor said words matter, suspension is correct. By early afternoon, rumor weather shifted. The exclusive began to die where injunctions land. Outlets ran Lily S. statement against the judge, S. order, and hotel footage that showed a woman refusing a doorway. Not everyone apologized. Internet gravity rarely returns satellites to truth, but the main current moved. A contractor said no, a machine tried to eat that no, and the machine was coughing up parts. At 3:10 p.m., Rivas walked out with Victor in cuffs, not for the edit yet, but for an older warrant tied to paying building staff for K-card clones. He tried to look like a misunderstanding in Cologne. It didn't fit. Elodie left without cuffs or a phone, and with a dentist S-card, Darla slid into her palm. At 3:42, Harper stood in the lobby with a small suitcase and a larger silence. She told Adrian that optics weren't crimes. He said optics become crimes when you use them to make crimes look like optics. She asked Lily, gently poisonous, whether she enjoyed her first and last brush with power. Lily said power brushed her first. What she liked was work. Harper smiled a no-teeth smile and stepped into an elevator that didn't fight its doors. At 4 Adrian called staff to the hangar with the glass spine. He kept it short. The airline would not smear a woman for refusing harassment, would not pack a courtroom with spin, and would not fund awareness without enforcement. 3 clean reporting channels, protection that isn't theoretical, and a budget line big enough to land on. People clapped. Policies hear applause. The demand letters that tried to frighten Lily curled in their tray like leaves. Jonah drafted a response so factual it warmed, and a countersuit narrow enough to track and heavy enough to matter. By sunset, the week learned to breathe. Lily walked the concourse and felt the difference between being hunted and being recorded by cameras that worked. Mason Ruiz, Mexican-American ops chief with square shoulders and ramp grit, handed her a laminated trainer track card, pay bump, benefits guaranteed. He said she'd earned it the way you win leverage on a stuck bolt. Pressure, patience, right tool. She went home for an hour, the kind that tastes like bread and quiet, then came back for the late turn. The airport after dark belongs to people who count by lights, not clocks. Near midnight, she found Adrian on the mezzanine, sleeves rolled, tie forgotten, looking like a man who decided not to be consumed by a fire. He stood inside. He asked about Noah. She said fine, singed pride intact lab. He said her choice not to sprint on the fake bracelet text probably saved both a server and a case. She said it saved her from letting fear pick her route. He shifted his weight, then said what she didn't expect. He didn't want their paper marriage to be a tool she had to wield anymore. If she wanted out, he'd carry the mess to the door and hold it until it clicked behind them. He had a pen. She told the truth. The paper bought time to make better choices. She wouldn't trade a bad story for a rushed one. She'd keep working, keep paying for the life she wanted, keep her own name. If, later, when the sky wasn't a tea full of smoke and injunctions, they wanted to talk like people instead of tactics, they could meet where runway lights start and terminal lights end. He laughed the crosswind laugh, relief, gratitude, knowledge that metal could have bent and didn't. He promised coffee that didn't taste like regret. She said he'd better. They stood at the rail and watched a 737 line up on centerline, engines spooling, wingtips trembling just enough to admit the air existed. Below, Darla swapped a nod with Priya, who cradled a dry laptop like a cat rescued from a bath. Jonah walked past, phone to ear, negotiating the timing of sealing and unsealing. Eleanor texted Adrian a single period, her punctuation for enough for today. Harper's badge no longer opened doors. Victor's watch blinked under a different ceiling. Elodie replied to Lily's, "You okay?" with trying, which was the correct tense. The jet released its brakes. Sound rolled up the glass like a promise. They watched speed gather, lights blur, lift happen, wheels still seeing the runway and already not owing it weight. Then the tuck and the math changed. Lily exhaled. She thought about week-long weather and the grammar of consent and silence, about paper rings and real work, about a future she wanted to pay for without becoming anyone's headline. Sometimes the best ending isn't a kiss or a gavel, but a checklist read aloud until both engines agree. Before they turned back to the night, she told Adrian she prefers beginnings that don't pretend to be endings. He said he does too. They walked until the glass ran out and stepped back onto the floor that needed hands. Outside, a second set of landing lights appeared. Another arrival, another start. Inside, the servers hummed, the mirrors held, and finally, the narrative belonged to the person who lived it.